If you're sick of Meta ads, roller coaster performance, and you want a proven formula on what numbers to look, how to optimize your ad account, how to troubleshoot your ROAS every time, this is a video for you. Let's dive in. So, often time people ask me, hey, what my target ROAS should be, but I tell them that's something that needs to be reverse engineered and that depends on your target. So, in case you have 20% net margin, or you want 20% net margin, you want to go from there to contribution margin, to gross margin, to MRR, and to ROAS. I did a video before on understanding like what is the difference between the net margin, contribution margin, and gross margin, but you can check it in more details. But let's now stick to the fact that like, okay, if we want 20% net margin, let's say it ends up that we need ROAS of 2.5 in the ad account. So I'm guided by that 20% net margin. If a client says, hey, I want 10% net margin and I want to grow faster, that impacts our target in the ad account. How are we actually tracking that and what my main KPI mostly is? It's usually through the tool called Iris Finance, where we have forecasted what contribution margin on a daily basis we need to hit. So it looks like this. There's a chart for every day. Okay, what amount we need to hit. For example, target was 500K. We ended up with 588. We basically achieved the target, exceeded the target by 6%. But this tells me, okay, whether I'm pacing in the right direction, or whether I need to change something, or whether I need to pull back. In this case, we realized, okay, we are below. Then we started pushing, we find a winning ad and actually enabled to exceed the target. But this is a kind of like your pacing chart where you're comparing your performance to the projections. Obviously, if you're below, you have to do something, but you know to what extent you're below or not. You can do something like this in yourself, but I found Iris to be pretty useful tool for something like this. And besides that, we also track all of these things that I mentioned initially in Klipfolio or Google Sheets. So basically, we again have net margin target that we go through contribution margin, gross margin, MER, spend. So I can see each month, okay, where we are, how much people are buying, how many new customers do we have, what's our MER, and how's that affecting our margin? Because potentially you could have an amazing ROAS, but that ROAS would not necessarily result in a target net profit that you have. Why? Because potentially tariffs were in a place and you were paying more for the shipping and to get people to the customer mind. Maybe your COGS increased. Maybe Facebook went up. So potentially not necessarily the same ROAS is going to have you same net margin. Potentially you have two different products with a different price point and a different margins, and you don't have the same ROAS target for them. Potentially pushing one more than the other, if let's say Facebook start pushing them in a catalog, would result in a less money. So you want to track either in a dollar amount or a percentage amount. I'm a fan of dollar amount, and this is example where I want to explain to you that like your ROAS target can go down as you scale. For example, this is a projection with a product that has 20% of the AOV our COGS. So let's say if you're selling $100, our COGS to create the product and to ship it are $20. So in theory, to get to, let's say, 100K profit, we can spend 150K with ROAS of 3. Or we can spend here around 500 with a ROAS of 2. So those are totally two different targets and on totally two different spend levels. And that's important because often clients tell me, hey, like we are scaling and the ROAS goes down. And tell them, but yeah, I mean, that's obvious. ROAS will always go down as you scale. But that's not necessarily a bad thing because if we have a big volume, we can offset lower efficiency. So it's up to you to decide whether you want to spend 500K with a ROAS of 2 to get to 100K or spend somewhere between 100 and 150 with a ROAS of 3. Obviously, ROAS of 3 is less achievable, but on a lower spend, maybe it's more achievable. On the other side, if you're going to spend 500K, probably you need more creative resources, you need more video editors that you're going to buy, or you need more creative agencies. So like it's up to you to decide whether investing a bit more is worth it, but then potentially you'll acquire more customers, so that would pay off down the road. But on the other side, maybe you don't have a cash flow, so maybe it's better to stick with 100K spend with a ROAS of 3. This is something that you want to understand before you actually start scaling, because I know numbers are boring, but that they actually make or break your business. Once we have our target ROAS dialed in, I want to track it on a daily basis because in theory, I know if I can hit ROAS of 2, I would end up with a 20% net margin. So okay, now my ROAS is target. If I don't have that figured out, that's not great. So for each client of mine, I keep track of these numbers: CPM, CPC, click rate, AOV, and conversion rate, because those are only metrics that are impacting your ROAS. So when a client tells me, hey, our ROAS went down, but nothing changed, I tell them it's impossible. Something must have changed. So for example, this is client from January. When we ended the sale on the 5th, you can see click rate went down because the ads were not so appealing, because they did not have an offer, and the conversion rate went down because, again, there was no discount. So I know that, like, okay, now this ROAS that went down is a combination of us removing the sale ads and us removing the offer and the discount from the website. So I know, like, okay, performance will be bad. So what I do, I pull back budgets. This is like 30% drop between 5th and 6th, but I knew that that would happen. So when you have this color coded, you can identify the trends. And when you identify the trends, you know what the problem is and how to fix it. So I definitely suggest you guys to track something like that. In terms of the numbers, as I said, depending what the client tells me, my main KPI is, that's my North Star metric. Whether it's new customer ROAS, whether it's MER, whether it's net margin. Maybe some clients like wants just number of new sales, not necessarily on a specific ROAS. Those are brands that are heavily scaling. That's my North Star metric. Besides that, on a daily basis, I check Shopify revenue and Shopify conversion rate day over day, because I want to see, like, okay, where we are pacing today at 2 p.m. compared to yesterday, or let's say 9 a.m. What's happening? Like maybe we don't have a spike, or like maybe we have a spike, but then I notice, okay, we send an email that is not necessarily Facebook thing, that the performance is better. It's actually because we send an email. Once I have that data, I'll check the ROAS in the ad account and in my third-party tracking software. If ROAS is down, as I mentioned, I'll check one of those 4 metrics and I will determine my next step. If it's not only ROAS on Facebook that's down, but also on Google, on YouTube, on Taboola, then potentially something bigger is happening. It's not just Facebook performance. So it's either consumer sentiment or something is wrong with the website and people are not converting enough, because rarely all four channels will stop working together unless there's a bigger consumer sentiment. For example, after the Prime Day, there's going to be a drop because people will be in the buying mode initially, and when that ends, there's going to be a drop. So I know it's not Facebook fault, it's like general consumer sentiment. Additional thing in the ad account is that I want you to understand is, when you're running on different attribution settings, your performance would be different. So let's say this is an ad account where you spend 2.3 million a month. ROAS is on 7-day click, 1-day view, it's 2.55. On 1-day click, it's 1.56. That's a huge difference. So if you're running on different attribution setting, when you're running on a lower attribution setting, the ROAS would go down. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because let's say my average ROAS for 1-day click is 1.56, and I start running one ad set on 1-day click, I get ROAS of 1.8. This is lower than this 2.55, but I know that my difference between 1-day click and 7-day click 1-day view is actually 1.63. So this 1.77 would actually end up being higher than this 2.55, which actually means that the performance when I'm running on 1-day click and I get 1.7 is actually better. So you need to understand that when you're running on different attribution windows. In terms of the ad account, what I found is that I'm looking at today data plus last or 4 or 5 days. I found 3 days to be too small sample, and I will find last 7 days to be too big sample, because I could get a sale on a day 1 and day 2, and then I'm taking that into consideration. My whole performance of the 7 days could be amazing because of those 2 days, although the performance is dropping after that. As I said, my main KPI is contribution margin, then MER, then ROAS. I'm never day trading unless there's a sale happening. So for example, Father's Day sale, Mother's Day sale, Prime Day, Labor Day, Black Friday, something like that. Unless that's happening, there's really no reason for day trading and increasing budgets multiple times a day, because I value stability more than just short-term gains. In terms of the budget increments, it really depends how much I'm spending in the ad account and what's my overall budget on the ad set. So for example, if something is on $50, I can probably increase it to 100 without like obeying the 20% rule. Because if I go from 50 to 62, then to 70 something, it's gonna take forever and I don't have time if the performance is good. Also, I cannot bump the budget from 500 to 1K because it's gonna be super overwhelming, because it's a big increment. So to summarize, on a smaller budgets, I can increase budgets by doubling. On a bigger one, not necessarily. But there's a caveat to this. If let's say I'm spending 500 a day and one of my ad sets is on 100, I will not probably bump it to 200 because that would be too overwhelming change for the whole ad account. Then I would probably increase it gradually, multiple ad sets. But if I'm spending 10K a day and I have an ad set on $100 that's doing pretty well, I'm gonna bump it to 200. So you can see that's circumstantial. Now, I know people would ask like, but what about the learning phase? Honestly, I don't care about resetting the learning phase. I don't care about necessarily exiting the learning phase. If my performance is better, I could stuck in learning phase all the time, but I value the performance more. What I want you to remember from this is that I use cost caps and manual bids for scaling because I found them amazing tool for scaling when there's a higher demand, like those holidays that I mentioned, or during the weekend. So for example, I know conversion rate would be higher on a weekend. So having a cost cap, let's say around my target CPA of 50 and let's say 5K budget would allow Facebook to spend that budget fully during the event. For example, we had a 4th of July. I had that campaign created on Wednesday with 5K budget and $50 CPA. On Wednesday, it spent 1K. On Thursday, it spent 1.5K, but on Friday, it spent the full 5K. On Saturday, it also spent the full 5K. Why? Because there was an opportunity. Conversion rate was higher, people were into buying mode, and we had a proven ads. So I'm not doing this with random ads. I'm doing this only with winning ads. And then this allows me to not try to guess how much I can spend. Because let's say I put the 1K budget, I don't know whether I can scale to 1.5K or to 1.2K or maybe to 5K. This way, Facebook does the hard work of scaling for me. Should I turn off an ad or not? I mean, honestly, that's a silly question. I know there are people preaching never turn off an ad, but if the performance is bad, you definitely should turn it off, especially if it's like way worse than your target. If your ROAS target is 2, but you have an ad that's at 1, you have to kill it. If you have target of 2, but your ad is at 1.7, and you notice that it's doing pretty much top of the funnel because the frequency is low and your MER is good, then you're not gonna kill it. So again, it's circumstantial, but if the performance is very bad and your MER is bad, then definitely kill an ad. What also to do if the performance is not good? There are 2 rules that I made up. One is handbrake. Basically, let's say I had an ad set that I managed to scale from 100 to 250, then to 400, then to 550. In that case, ad set at 550 stopped performing. So, okay, I will pull it back. I call this a handbrake. I will pull it back to 400. Basically, I will pull it back to the level where it was decent performer. That's one thing. If that does not work, there's another thing that I do. It's called resurrection. If I manage to scale this ad set with a specific ad 3-4 times and performance was good for 2 weeks, and now in the last 2-3 days, performance is pretty bad, it doesn't make sense for me to kill the whole ad set. It also doesn't make sense for me to kill the ad because it was good for a period of time. So what I would do, I would kill the ad and I would duplicate it. I would basically give it a fresh chance to start from scratch, although I would do it with a post ID, so it carries the social proof. And in 9 out of 10 cases, that duplicate ad would just continue with the good performance that it had before it died out. So that's it, guys. To recap, you need to understand what net margin you want so you can have a proper ROAS target. Once you have a proper ROAS target, make sure you track CPM, CPC, click rate, AOV, and conversion rate. Once that's dialed in the ad account, make optimization based on today plus last 4 or 5 days data, and make sure that you leverage cost cap for scaling, and then you turn off bad ads. And there are some small tricks like handbrake and resurrection that you can pull in your ad account to resurrect the performance. If this is overwhelming and you want me to do this for you and you're an ecom brand spending at least 50K a month, just book a call with me below and let's scale your ad account.